Welcome to DYM Marriage Transformation Coaching, heard in 180 countries, top 1% podcast worldwide. And we are thrilled that we walk alongside marriages that have been suffering and struggling, sometimes for decades. Then they come to our work and God changes everything. Listen in because you're going to hear transformation stories that are going to give you hope that things can change for you, or inspiring conversations with other experts, or teaching that's literally going to give you practical tools to make your marriage better today. My name's Belah Rose. Here we are. Let's go. Heal intimacy biblically. Delight your marriage. Hi there. Welcome to DYM, Delight Your Marriage. We're all about marriage transformation coaching. My name's Belah Rose, author, trainer, coach, and I am thrilled that you're here and honestly extremely humbled, honored, so grateful for today's conversation with Gary Thomas. If you're not familiar with Gary, he has a very honored position in my heart. Years ago, I read his book, Sacred Marriage, and if you haven't read it, it's a really good one. I highly recommend it. And I recently read his book, The Life You Were Reborn to Live, also a great one. But he's one of the only newsletters I consistently open and read of all the ones that enter the inbox or I've ever subscribed to or unsubscribed to. And it just always reminds me to refocus on Jesus. Now, he's a man that travels a lot and speaks a lot and has a huge amount of influence on the body of Christ. And I am so honored that he has been a mentor to me over the last, here and there, and much more recently, more often we've connected and I've been able to just ask his advice on things. And as DYM grows and is shifting, I am honored that he has provided that space for me because he's listened to the podcast. And when we first got connected, it turns out he'd been listening to the podcast and I'd been recommending his books to others. And it was just amazing what God did and how he moved there. Here's what Gary actually interviewed me for this brand new partnership that we are doing together. So because he's this awesome author and yet does not necessarily have that next step for folks, he and I are partnering together. And I think this interview is going to give you more insight into me, if you didn't know, some of the story of how DYM came to be, why, and what our convictions are. And then it's also going to give you an insight around Gary and why I think this is so valuable for our people to learn more about him and have that connection to our work and what God does here. So hope this blesses you and encourages you today. Let's get into it.
Well, hey, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today with Belah Rose. She's become a dear friend and colleague. We've had the same focus on helping marriages be transformed to the glory of God as they draw closer to each other and closer to Christ. And we're here to announce I think, a very exciting new collaboration where I think Belah can bring something into what we've been doing here that we just aren't equipped and don't have the time for, and that Belah and her ministry, Delight Your Marriage, can provide. Belah, I'm trying to remember when we met. I know I had listened to some of your podcasts, and I think you reached out for me to be a guest, and you were surprised when I said I was a listener and a fan.
It was so cool. It was such a cool connect because I think you were launching a book and then came on the podcast and we were like, wow, it was really fun. It's been years. I don't remember exactly what year it was. It was 2020 or 2021, something.
Okay.
And then stayed in touch since, I think.
Yeah. Why don't you tell your listeners will know this, but
Yeah.
for my readers, some who may not, and listeners, why don't you tell them a little bit about your story? What got you into marriage ministry and where you're at now?
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny. it was yesterday, I believe, the day before, my son, he's like, "Mom, I don't wanna, I'm not trying to insult you, but I never knew why you even needed to light your marriage." I was like, "Why does anyone need to light your marriage?" And because I thought everyone was like you and Pa. And now I see marriages, I'm like, "No wonder they need to light your marriage." He's like, and I felt very affirmed by that. He's 11. So, but that's what it was when I was growing up. My parents, did not have a great marriage, and they just didn't have good role models themselves, and so even though I loved Jesus and I wanted to change the world for Jesus, I didn't know what marriage should look like, and so even though I wanted to be a missionary as I was growing up, and I thought, once I get married, he'll be fiery for Jesus, I'll be fiery for Jesus, we'll do even more for the kingdom of God. And so I did everything, quote, right. I saved myself for marriage, got married very early at 18. And I was sadly mistaken that marriage was really, really hard. And I didn't know how to love him well. He didn't know how to love me well. And so we were just hurting each other. And there was so much strife and so much anger and so much pain. And I couldn't love him in the ways that now I know that men need to be loved. And in the same way, he didn't know how to love me in the way women need to be loved. So I take fully responsibility of my choice, but I decided to put forth divorce. I felt my spirit was broken and I went away from Jesus because I was so sadly distraught by what ended up happening because I did it God's way as far as I knew. And and so I was promiscuous for some years and finally met a man who I call him the kindest man I've ever met, Darrow. And God loved me and healed my heart through Darrow's love. We got married, surrendered our lives to Jesus. And then I was like, well, I still want to change the world for Jesus. What do I do now? And through a different series of things and different pursuits, I heard this phrase. Still remember where I was when I heard it. Don't pick what you want to do based on the crowd, based on the money, even based on your passion, but do the work that needs to be done. And for me in my life, what I found was marriage can harm you or heal you the most of
Uh-huh.
any relationship, even causing you to go away from Jesus
Uh-huh.
or come close to Jesus. And
Uh-huh.
so I thought, this is what I have to pursue. And specifically, intimacy in marriage, because I find that to be such a catalyst of a great marriage includes intimacy, or a terrible marriage almost rarely does. And I just didn't have any stewardship or discipleship around that. And so I wanted to gift that to women and help them. So I wrote my first book, Delight Your Husband, and I was started the podcast and started coaching women. And then men kept reaching out to me to say, how do I get my wife to work with you? And I thought, I don't know. I don't know. That's something you've got to figure out. Until I started talking to some of these men. And so then it became evident, wow, there are some gaps here. There are some things I could maybe help these men come alongside and give them some guidance and insight and tools and wisdom around it. And so with my husband's blessing and spiritual counselors giving me the green light, prayerfully, I opened up a pilot group for men to coach and it filled up right away. And I coached them for 3 months, and every single one of them got amazing transformations, even though their wife didn't know they did the work. So it was really is focused on just one person doing the work, whether it's a husband or a man separately. And now, these years later, we have women's programs and men's programs where just with one doing the work, God can transform the whole marriage.
And that's such a key issue about even just one person doing the work. I know Deborah Fileta, who I wrote the book Married Sex With, has often said, when you say there's nothing you can do because of your spouse, you give up all your power. You give up all your influence. You basically paint yourself as a victim. Now, we're not blaming someone if they're doing everything right and their spouse is doing everything wrong. This isn't about blame. It's about a strategy and a
Mhm.
path forward that usually, when you start to do things and address issues, it can change the dynamic for the better. Maybe not making it perfect. One things I love about your story is just the grace of Jesus and in his kindness. You've never defended your decision to seek a divorce. Your whole life is spent on helping people avoid that. Even though my listeners know, I think there are places where some women and men are forced into it. Jesus talks about adultery. Paul talks about abandonment. I've talked about abuse, but
Mm,
not that I'm putting my words at all with Jesus and Paul. I'm explaining how I think from their teachings I derive that. Um, but often Lisa and I have seen in our sacred marriage conferences couples whose marriages fell apart the first time are most passionate about making the next marriage work. And they're the ones that are inviting us out and working with couples and doing the sacred marriage small groups and whatnot, because they realize what you said. A good marriage can be so good, so
mhm,
life-giving. It feeds our walk with God, and God feeds our walk with each other. And a difficult marriage, well, it can feel like the closest to hell we're going to get on this earth
mm,
sometimes. And what drew me to your ministry was the demonstrated effectiveness. Hearing the
mm.
stories on your podcast of guys who had given up. There was no physical intimacy in their marriage. It had died. And you help them see, well, you know what? We'll set up this, we'll set up that, we'll address this and whatnot. And the joy that they had, the hope that they had, that they thought they really wanted to be with their wives, but they
Yeah.
didn't feel like they could go on with the marriage the way it was. And by working with them and coaching with them one on one, you're able to give them hope. And of course, you've done it with so many women when their husbands just don't know what to do. And part of your thing is, well, there's certain ways that men, well, they want to be loved and cherished, and how to set that up. There's certain ways women want to love and be cherished, and how to set that up. Um, and you and I are weird thinking that men and women are a little bit different. We don't over traffic in the stereotypes, right? Everybody is unique and individual, but there are certain truths that tend to be true for each gender. And so in your teaching and in your coaching, you do recognize that. And I think that's what's helped make it so effective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that every like, for example, the 5 love languages. I think it's a fantastic framework. And I think that it is above a framework of men and women are different, because if a woman is not feeling safe in her marriage, emotionally, yes, physically, of course, but emotionally, she doesn't care if he buys her all the gifts she wants. She wants to feel safe. She wants to know that he actually cares about her feelings. He actually is going to listen. He actually is there for her. But but then after their safety, and the two other pieces of the Delight Your Marriage framework that we call it is, safe, known, wholeheartedly cherished for women. And so if that's in place, then yeah, maybe she also loves gifts, and that's part of her feeling cherished. And so for men, to your point, they're different, and biblically speaking, it's described that way too. Respect, right? That's very clear biblically. Admiration, though, when I was trying to discern what it meant to be a wife that loved her husband well, I I I thought I understood respect, but it turns out I was actually telling him what to do and correcting him and criticizing him and giving him
Yeah.
feedback all the time, and these things that I didn't realize that was very disrespectful, and it was pushing down who he felt as a man, having no motivation to go forward because he's gonna be criticized every step of the way. But then admiration, I could actually build him up. I could actually encourage him. I could be a cheerleader for him. And then wholehearted intimacy, which is something that women, yes, women get blessed through intimacy too. But a lot of times what happens is a woman will go towards intimacy first and foremost to satisfy her husband. And that's the first step of possibly her motivation to then get to a place of, oh my gosh, this is a blessing for me too. And so that's kind of this framework is almost like the foundations of a good marriage. But yeah, a husband wants to safety too. He wants to be able to share his heart too. So it's not to say this is exclusive to one or the other. It's just to say this is kind of the foundational framework. And when you heal to the degree that that's in place, then okay, now there's just so much freedom together.
Yeah. So people might kind of ridicule the whole bit about admiration. They can take it in a wrong way, but this was years ago. I mean, maybe 25 years ago, and I was doing some talks with women. I cut out some ads from magazines that market men like GQ and Esquire and Sports Illustrated and whatnot. And I just, when they're trying to sell products, I just said, what do you notice about these pictures when a guy has a watch when a guy has a suit or something, I go, what they're selling is he wants his wife to look at him the way that woman in the ad is looking at him. They're selling that admiration more than they're selling the watch, more than they're selling the suit. Uh, Maybe even cigarettes back then. I don't know. But, I think capitalism often speaks loudly. They have to know what's going to sell a product. Well, what do men want? They want to be admired. I think they also want to be respected. Certainly, they want the wholehearted intimacy. And by wholehearted intimacy, I love the way you describe that. It is not obligation sex. It's mutual pleasure. For the guy, it is just as important that he knows, in one sense, that he's not just desired, but capable of pleasing his wife to the fullest. The guys that I talked to for the book I wrote with Deborah were just like, what it made him feel like. One guy said, I feel like Superman when I could leave my wife so satisfied and panting and happy, and I know I've given her that pleasure. So it's not a selfish thing, though they
Mhm.
get something out of it. It really is a wholehearted where to be desired, to be connected, to please her, to leave her satisfied. Um, and so what you do is say, well, here's how you start to set that up. And so you might not get, when working with guys, to the wholehearted intimacy point for a long time. And you say, look, we've got to first, what's going to make her feel safe and secure?
Mhm.
What's going to make her
Mhm.
feel cherished? Of course, people will recognize my book, Cherish, in there. That's where we're certainly simpatico in that. Um, and so by working with them directly, you're able to do what we have never been able to do. I can write a book. What does it mean to be cherished? I write the book with Deborah. What does it mean to be connected, have a mutually pleasurable physical intimacy in your marriage? Sacred marriage, putting together the expectations. Marriage is difficult, but God can use it. What is the spiritual purpose behind that? Even a lifelong love that looks at how spiritual intimacy drives marital intimacy. But what you do that we're not able to do, and why I'm excited to be working with you and encourage people to consider you, is that you help work with groups, and you've been so successful in helping them to apply this. And again, the testimonies are legion. Why don't you give us one example of, like, let's say a man whose life was changed or turned around, and then a woman whose marriage was turned around?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the length of stories are so long. I'll give you one that's pretty recent that is just rattling around in my head of celebrations. But there was a couple that were married for for maybe 30 to 40 years, but 10 years without intimacy at all, not even touching each other,
Mm.
no seeing each other naked, nothing. And in 3 months, they both worked. In 3 months, they both worked, and now there's intimacy between the two of them.
Wow.
So that's just been amazing to see week by week, week by week, week by week. But it did have to be a lot of healing emotionally speaking. So I'll tell you about a woman that, yeah, is soon to graduate. You know, her husband was a big video gamer and just really apathetic even
It's so
towards their
common.
child, and
Yeah.
yeah, just really checked out of the marriage, checked out of life, checked out of motivation. And yeah, how do you deal with that? I mean, what is a wife to do? I know what I would do. I would yell at him and tell him what to do and get off the couch. And guess how effective that would be? In fact, I've done things like that, and it is not effective. But no, she did the work. She did the program 3 months, and now he's planning date nights for her. She went on a girls' weekend the other weekend, and he took care of their child completely. He's not staying up late to play video games. They're going to sleep on time together. I mean, it sounds like a dream, and that happened in 3 months, and only she did the work. It's possible that he didn't
Mm.
even know she did the work. I think not. I think not. Um, and the reason that happens a lot is because we don't want the other spouse to feel pressure. And so if it's possible, it's kind of like a birthday party. You know how you're doing a surprise for your spouse. They don't know that you're doing it, but it's for them. It's a blessing for them. But it's just really cool to see it's a natural response. And then the goal is that they would get to a place where it's like, surprise! And they're just thrilled with how the marriage has changed. But yeah, I'll give you one more man story where only he did the work. and she changed. So there was a man I remember when he came, he was just like, "She's cold, she's cut off, she doesn't want anything to do with our relationship, doesn't want me to hold her, she shrinks back every time I try to go to an embrace or cuddle, but she's just cold." And so he did the work, and he always felt like he was the woman in the relationship. He's the one that wants to talk. He's the one that wants to share
Mhm.
emotionally. And I hear this a lot, but this particular man I'm thinking about, and he's a very structured, very effective, very high up in his career. And he's like, I wanted a program that worked. I wanted one that had consistent results and one that had a proven process. I didn't want to just keep throwing things up against the wall, hoping something sticks. And that's exactly what he found here. It's a roadmap. It's week by week. It's module by module. You have this first milestone you accomplish. Okay, great. Let's go to the next module. And that's how he went week by week. And now she comes towards him to cuddles on the couch, and she shares her heart with him. And she, yes, went towards intimacy as well. And I got to meet her. And that's so often the story, but it's because he treated her like a woman. He didn't even know that instinctively he's treating her the way he wants to be treated. But, if your neighbor loves vanilla ice cream, don't bring them chocolate.
Yes.
Bring them vanilla.
That's great. Now, have you had some there must be some because, I mean, your podcast is filled with so many great victory stories. Have there been some, though, I'm just trying to be honest here, where even though one person does the work, the other person just isn't gonna respond? I know that's probably the low minority, and tell us about how low, but what happens then? And has that happened? Or have you seen everybody respond?
Well, the cool thing is, I have heard clients tell me this. So this is kind of their quoting. They've never seen somebody do the work and there haven't been good results. Now,
Good.
does it
That's a good
mean
way to put it. Right.
Yeah. Does it mean that the result of their wife, X, Y, and Z, their fantasy coming into it? Maybe not. But what I do find is that we even just graduated a gentleman who was a pastor and who was unfortunately um, a situation with pornography caused
Right.
him to have to leave the ministry. And so not only leave the ministry, but lose his livelihood and his even where they live together and his marriage and his relationship with the kids. I mean, it was just a very tragic thing. And what did he say in his season reflection form was, as horrific as this is the most peace-filled, joyful person I have ever been, ever.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm no longer filled with self-loathing and self-hate. I see myself as a child of God. And I mean, if that's the results,
Aw,
glory to Jesus, you know?
amen.
And then he's really living in integrity, and now you can build your life on that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so there have been sad situations, certainly. But ultimately, when we're leaning on the word of God and we're focusing on what we can do, which we can do a whole lot, and our spouses then uh, are kind of interacting with, and we're being influenced by us. There's just so often what will happen. This is a funny thing, but so often a husband will come first because he'll be, again, interested by the book title or the whatever, the material that's focused on intimacy because it's real. It needs to be addressed, and it's addressed here. But so often, and the wife, somehow she's heard something and she really doesn't like the work for it's just her own painful past. Um, but then she sees him change
Mm.
and she is intrigued and she's interested. And then a couple months later, who knows how long, but she comes and does the program herself. So yeah, it's marvelous. It's really cool, and it's your best bet. I would say one thing, and I know, Gary, sacred marriage and your material is so well aligned with this fully, but I think that if we're loving our spouse to get something back, we're gonna be sadly mistaken, and we will actually build resentment and bitterness, and it'll just grow into negativity. But if you're loving your spouse out of an outpouring of you loving God, I love my spouse because
Yes.
I love God, and
Yes.
that's my first human
Yes.
neighbor, my human assignment. Okay, so if I'm gonna love God, so I'm gonna love my spouse, then eventually the byproduct of loving, doing the right thing towards God is a really awesome healed marriage, and it's not dependent on what your spouse does or doesn't do.
One of the things I love is that I do think a lot of people go into your program with manipulative motives. They want to
Yeah.
get something, which you get. If a guy's in a sexless marriage, if a woman's in a loveless marriage, who can blame them for saying, I want something different? But what happens when they go through your program is you put in that spiritual element where
Mhm.
this is about loving God's son. This is about loving God's daughter. It's about having your heart right with the Lord, about the joy we get from loving. Those motivations transform.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. So even if somebody's entering it for the wrong reason, what I've seen in your ministry is they come out of it with a superior motivation, which is a huge win. Um, because I think the reality is, and this is nothing to be ashamed of, most people want a connected marriage for good reasons. It's wonderful. It's life-giving. Um, and it's not wrong if a husband thinks, I'm just tired of a marriage where there's no physical intimacy. And it's not wrong for a woman to say, I want physical intimacy, but not the kind that he's offering. Um, because when a marriage is working, it can be so good. And so I think this is a good thing for somebody to say, you know what? We care about our family. We made a pledge. We've gotten into this place. And most of the guys when I've worked with, they're ashamed of the porn. They don't want to be a part of it. I can't say everyone. I think some guys have given themselves over to where, and maybe they just don't know how good real relating can be. And there are women that you've worked with, I know that sometimes they just have selfishness and whatnot. But when they see love displayed, and when they
Mhm.
see the beauty of a person in their character who is loved by God and wants to love you and is operating that way, I think that invites them out of the selfishness, out of the coldness, out of the manipulation. Um, there's no 100% guarantee, but it's the
Mhm.
best shot that a lot of people are going to have. And so if you're listening to this and your marriage is just it hasn't been there, and you've read the books. Maybe I've had people have read Sacred Marriage 5 or 6 times and cherished 2 or 3 times and whatnot, and it's still not there. This can be the next step where it begins with a clarity call, where Bella's ministry will have somebody say, "What's your situation? What's going on?" And that's free. So, Bella, why don't you describe the clarity call, and what happens there? This is to
Yeah.
see if they're a good candidate for what you offer.
That's right, that's right, and, you know, our it this is one of my favorite parts of our organization is the clarity call, because these are people that pray for you and love you, don't know your name until you sign up, right? But they actually love because we really believe that who God brings into our doors are people we are meant to love. And so we listen deeply to your story. And each of our clarity advisors have had a similar story where things weren't amazing at some point in their marriage. They came into Delight Your Marriage through a clarity call themselves and then went to the coaching and God transformed everything. And now they want to give back in this same seat. And so that's what they do. They listen to your story, they discern how we can help you and also help you to discern what started this whole thing? What's at the root of this? And if they do think that you're a good candidate, then there's actually a second piece. It's a program discovery call. So then we would invite you to, okay, these are the things that we think with a couple more clarifications, and we'll have some homework for you. One thing we invite you to do is actually re-listen to that clarity call, because so often there's this breakthrough. I tell you, when I used to do those clarity calls, there's this breakthrough moment of somebody noticing what they hadn't recognized before, that if we could get this piece right, how much it would affect so many other places. And it's a beautiful process to go through, regardless if ultimately you join the coaching program or not. It's yeah, it's definitely a beautiful thing. So I would say, um, it's worth that first step to find out, you know, is this the right next step for you? And we would absolutely be honored by your story.
Yeah. So my encouragement is really, especially with the free clarity call, what do you have to lose? If the books haven't helped, the conferences haven't helped, which I think can be good for maintenance. I think it's great to give information and sustain people and give them motivation. But in so many situations, they just need one person that's going to say, "Okay, let me hear you. Let me talk to you. Let's pray about this together." And go from there. And so from the clarity call, you said the second one you called that for I forget the
Yeah, program discovery call.
okay.
Mhm.
And then they enter a program, and that's usually with what, 5 or 6 people, Bella,
Yeah, it
right?
depends. That's right. Depends on the program. So it could be a smaller group, yeah, 6 to 8, or it could be a larger group where we're somewhere around 20, something like that. But as
Those are
well
different
as
options. I didn't mean to
different
interrupt, but
options.
those are different options when you think, "This is what I think I need." So you have different offerings, opportunities to go how deep you wanna go, and there is a price difference in that, but it gives people awareness of, "I think I need this," or, "I think I need that."
That's right. And somebody's graduating today, and one thing he talked about in his season reflection form is, what's the difference between what, other things they've tried and what is different about Delight Your Marriage's program. And he talked about the accountability. It's not just the information. They need somebody to walk them alongside and say, "Hey, how's it going? Okay, so did you implement the stuff this week? Okay, you did that stuff this week." And that's really what we're focused on. We're highly, highly accountable in this, and you're not having to do it by yourself anymore. You're in a team of men. You're in a small group. Even the larger group environments, you have a small group component with that, to have that accountability, that camaraderie. Because so often we hear, for men and women, they say, "I thought I was alone. I didn't realize these exact issues that I'm dealing with. Yeah, we have a different story, a different wife, but I feel the same things that he's feeling." And
Yeah,
then they can pray for each other, and it becomes such a powerful healing, um, body, oasis, if you will. And that's really the prayer for our clients.
yeah. I just was, a week or 2 ago at a graduation ceremony for our church is involved with Reengage, which Watermark puts out, which I think is a great program, if somebody's church has it. And just it requires a lot of work, it requires a lot of sharing, but looking at these couples who put in the work, where they're at now, the way they're touching each other again, they're smiling at each other again, they have hope again. The work, the expense is more than worth it because, again, a good marriage is just a great investment in your life, and a bad marriage is just a drain all the time. And so why I wanted to work with Bella and Delight Your Marriage was just give people an opportunity that you can go beyond just reading books and attending conferences and whatnot. There is an option for you to have someone who's been where you've been, who could take your hand and say, "Yeah, these are common issues. Here are some things." And I like the approach of you can do the work on your own. Because a lot of times women will say, "Gary, I can't get him to go to counseling." Or the guy says, "I think she's kind of given up." That's a real life problem. And so this is a program that says, well, we can still work with you. There's still hope. And so that's what I'm excited about. Is there something else I need to know, Bella, before we close this up on something you would say about the program or how they get involved or whatnot? We'll have links to begin with the clarity call and whatnot in the notes portion, but is there something you would add before we sign off?
I would definitely just encourage you to say that there is really hope. Like, there really is. When you've been suffering for so many years, when you've been suffering for decades, when you've been feeling alone and gaslit, and to your point, Gary, it feels like hell on earth in your own home, your own four walls. You don't even want to be home because your spouse is there. And I mean, I've worked with clients who shake on their way home out of anxiety because their spouse is going to be there and he's going to be expecting something. I mean, it is hard things, and it's real. And even or couples that they're attracting their spouse back to them. It's not guaranteed, but it can happen. We've seen it happen where they attract their spouse back even when they're putting forth divorce papers, or a spouse and the husband are saying, we're separated, but we're going to give it one last try. If this doesn't work, nothing's going to work. But the thing is, what happens sometimes when people have those comments and those conversations, there's no follow up. Where are they going to try? Who is going to be there saying, "Come on, get up. Real life is real life. Let me pray for you. Come on, you can do it." And that's what we do here. We're just into the actual transformations. And this team, we pray for our people. We dance when they have celebrations. We have this little app that we do videos all the time with our teammates. We're like, we can't believe what God did. we're celebrating because God is just, I mean, it's every day we see these absolutely wild transformations. A woman, I'll end with this last story, is a woman who was abused as a child, sadly, sexual abuse, and she was also in this terrible cult situation, religious occult, and her husband was just desperate. I don't know how to love my wife well. He's cares about the Bible. He wants to do it well. He's thinking, well, maybe there's a deliverance situation based on her history. Like, what do I do? And yet he just leaned in and she leaned in, and they have experienced such powerful connection that they've never had in their whole lives.
Mm.
They she came in so broken, and God has healed her through her husband's love. And just the other day, he was coming home from a trip, and she was going to go and get something for herself. And she heard a voice say, Your husband's going to get one of those for you. And she was shocked, and she was like, "Okay, well, all right." And turns out that afternoon, he brought home the very thing that she was gonna get for herself. And it was just
Aw.
like God is working through. That's what she felt so loved by the Lord because she felt God and her husband were working together to heal her heart. So it's powerful. It's powerful. So there is hope. There's hope for you. There's hope for your wife. There's hope for, your husband. There's hope.
Yeah. And there's hope because of Jesus. I want to make it clear that this program is all about Jesus. It's about the healing power of God, the reconciling power of God, the power of love, which comes from God to heal the hurts of the past, to change the present, to give you hope for the future. Um, so we're completely aligned with that. That while we recognize there are some cases when divorce is going to happen, and someone can unilaterally push a marriage and a divorce, we don't deny that. And we don't ask women to stay in marriages where they're not safe or they're threatened. But we do believe that God's love can take a marriage that seems like it is not just dead, but buried 6 feet under. And God can resurrect that marriage. We've seen it happen. Belah has seen it happen. I've seen it happen where people that couldn't stand to be in the same room can't hardly keep their hands off of each other in a good way. And so we just want to offer an opportunity for those of you who are in that situation to say, hey, what do I have to lose? Doing nothing hasn't worked. Maybe I could try something else. Reading the books hasn't worked. Maybe I can try something else. Now, Bella, how far would you say? We've just talked about marriages in crisis.
Yeah.
Just before we go, what would you say for marriages? Just like, you know what? Maybe you've got a B plus marriage. Is delight your marriage appropriate for those who say we want to have an A+ marriage?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is that's interesting is what you don't know is what you don't know, right? In all situations, where is there a leak? What is it that's causing, though we do have regular intimacy, why isn't my wife really engaged? I mean, she goes for it, but it's not awesome or whatever, Sometimes it's like, well, there's an element that you're missing in a totally different part of your life, but because that's missing, she is just kind of showing up and being like, well, this is what has to happen. So there are things that affect, and in a similar way with a wife, she's like, I'm enjoying mostly, but I don't know why he's not engaged in her conversations. I don't know why, when was the last time we had a date or what have you? And gosh, was there a tweak in the way that you've been talking to him about this or that? And it's this healing process that we've been able to see actually even really good marriages become. I didn't know how good it could be. My number scale it's off the charts now. So we've heard that too.
It's just exciting to see the power of God to change a marriage. Um, None of us want to get divorced when we're first getting married. Um, and you even look back and think if you knew what you know now, you think you really could have seen your first marriage transformed. And that's your passion. And it's the grace of God where He takes us with whatever past we have and says, I want to use you to do something special. And I know you've already impacted hundreds of marriages, Bella, and I'm excited that some who have followed what Lisa and I have said and written and done can get to know you and your ministry. And it just seems like a great collaboration that we prayed about and we're excited to announce. And so you'll be seeing from Bella, those of you that are following me, couple times, few times a year as we deal probably more with topics just to remind you. But this is just to announce this new program. There's help. It begins with the clarity call. They take it from there. Different options to sign up for you to get marital coaching. That dead marriages can come alive because of the hope of Jesus, and some information that has been tested and proven true. Bella, thank you for this. I'm excited to see what happens, how many marriages can be renewed, because I don't think just of the marriages, I think of the smile it gives our Heavenly Father. He wants his daughters to be cherished. He wants his sons to be cherished. And when he
Mhm.
can see a marriage turn around that was draining two people and now it's giving them life and inspiring them to reach out to others, it makes him so happy. I'm excited for the kids, knowing the spiritual power when they see parents that are affectionate and love each other, and it sets their own expectations for what they should expect from marriage. I'm excited for the churches that are made stronger when marriages are
Mhm.
stronger. This is just so much hope up ahead for what can happen. So I'm really excited for what I think God is bringing about. And I want to encourage everybody to look in the notes where you get all the information. And, you can shoot us questions. There's comments on this for Bella's side and ours, where we'll do our best to get those answered. But thank you, Bella. One last word, or are we good?
Yeah, you mentioned pastors and churches, and I just want to applaud the pastors. When I wanted to be a missionary when I was growing up, um, I know now as an adult I wasn't given the grace to be a missionary, but I am thrilled, and my prayer has been that if I could help the missionaries have amazing
Oh,
marriages,
that's
they could
great because
do.
there might not be anything around them.
That's right.
And
That's
and
right.
Bella, also things like re-engage, sometimes it can be tough for a pastor because it
Yeah,
isn't completely private. And this is a way for a pastoral couple that have felt alone
yeah,
can have somebody who's worked with other pastors and can say, "Hey, we're here for you."
right.
So that's
Yeah,
great. And we know
yeah.
we have people all over the world that listen because we get comments from them. So
That's
this is
right.
an opportunity. You don't have to be here in the States. You don't have to see something else going on in your city.
Yeah.
Because of what's happening online, just about everybody could access this for a lot of really good reasons.
Yeah. And we do have some scholarships for full-time ministers, so that's a big, big part of our heart. If we can help the marriages of the pastors, of the gospel missionaries spread the gospel better, yes. So it is a
It's
blessing.
exciting
Thank
to
you.
hear. All right.
Yeah. I just want to add, Gary, it is an honor and a privilege and a blessing. I mean, you were one of the early authors that I read Sacred Marriage, years and years ago. And so the heart that you have for marriages and more importantly is your heart to have a character that's developed in the fire of marriage so that you can love Jesus well and you can live it out well. And I think we've taken that theme and run with it throughout this whole ministry. And I just applaud you, Gary and Lisa, and the work that you've done so faithfully, so diligently. Even now, at the age you guys are, just traveling as much as you are, I am amazed. I couldn't do it even at this age. I just so grateful for you, Gary.
Well,
So please, thank you.
and the reason we're grateful for you, Bella, and so others could know, there are a lot of other marriage ministries out there and I
Mhm.
publicize them. I love the needs are too great for us to be um, territorial.
Mm,
I
mhm,
love and if people go back, we've had interviews with other marriage ministries where we say we can learn a lot. But Lisa and I just haven't been able to focus on just marriage ministry. I love to write about marriage. I love to speak on marriage, but I'm a pastor. Um, I just preached a couple days ago on other issues before we had on persecution and then what is my purpose and calling and some of my books. The last one, The Life You're Reborn to Live, is not focused on marriage. And so I felt like I just haven't been able to do what other marriage ministries have done because every week they're hitting it. And so they've got their courses and whatnot. It just hasn't been the call of Lisa and I, but I feel like working with Delight Your Marriage, we can do that without us having to be in charge of it because I have great confidence in the
mhm.
spirit behind your ministry, the truth behind your ministry, and the passion behind your ministry. So, everybody, check this out. And again, what do you have to lose? clarity call is free, and you can go from there. Thank you, Belah.
Thank you, Gary. God bless you.
To celebrate this amazing partnership with Gary, what we wanted to do is something very special for Gary's audience specifically. So if you sign up and tell us that you were referred by Gary Thomas, you will receive a $500 or more savings by May 15th. So essentially, you've got however many days by May 15th to save $500 or more to transform your marriage. We're trying to motivate you to go ahead and change what matters most in your life is your relationship with your spouse, impacting your relationship with every other person. So if you sign up for Clarity Call and coaching before May 15th, you will receive a $500 savings or more, depending on the program. So we invite you to make the investment now here in spring, so then by summer, you've got an incredible marriage. We've seen it again and again. So sign up, go to delightyourmarriage.com/cc and sign up for a Clarity Call. So awesome. Thank you, Gary. Before we wrap up, let me pray for you, dear listener. Father, I trust that you are moving in this person's heart and mind. I trust you, Lord, that I thank you that your word never returns void. Father, that the themes of hope laced throughout this conversation would stay with them. God, you haven't left them. You are the God of all hope. Father, would you fill them with hope as they trust in you, Jesus? Just as Paul prayed, I pray that God, the source of hope, will fill you completely with joy and peace because you trust in him. Then you will overflow with confident hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what I pray for this one, Jesus, that you would invite joy and peace to fill them as they trust you. God, that there is reason to trust you. You are a trustworthy God. Help them in that, Lord. Thank you for all you're doing in their lives. Thank you that every bit, every detail matters, that you knit them together in their mother's womb. Every single detail mattered to you, and their heart today matters. So, Lord, I submit them to you and believe that you are working in them. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, as Gary mentioned, we would love to be part of your journey. Feel free to go to dymarriage.com and click on the link to schedule a call. Would love to be part of God's transformation for you. We'll talk soon.